Today we're going to be looking at Iroiro in the color Violet. So I'm sure you'll notice that my swatches are labeled 1 through 12. I just want you to know that that is not synonymous with hair levels. I do different video clips and pictures and such near the end of the video, so the numbers just help us keep track of each swatch. Also, these are human hair swatches, but the only one that is virgin hair is going to be the number 4 black swatch. Rest have been chemically colored or bleached at some point in their existence. So I will start by taking the dye directly from the container, and I will put it at the top of each swatch. Some people do like to dilute their dyes, so I will do a diluted version at the bottom of each swatch. Please keep in mind, everyone's hair is different, which means everyone's hair will take color differently. Plus, different screens and monitors and such can make colors look different. So please just use my video as a reference for how this could turn out for you. For the diluted section, we're going to do a 1:8 ratio. So that is 1 part of the dye to 8 parts diluter. So if you're confused about what diluter is, I always just give a really quick, easy answer that it is something that lightens the color of your semi-permanent dye. Each brand usually will sell their own version of a diluter, so you could definitely do that if that makes you feel more comfortable, but I, to keep things more fair, will always just use a plain white conditioner for diluting. So to let my swatches absorb as much color as possible, I'm gonna let these sit for 3 hours. I will then rinse them out, and then when they're dry, I'll meet you back here and we'll do some comparisons. This is pretty cool toned. I knew it was gonna be cool toned, but it's much more cool toned than even I was expecting. And maybe it's just me, but it almost basically looks like a blue. I actually would kind of put this in the Indigo family, especially looking at the direct dye section. So number 1 was originally green. Now the top half on all of the swatches does turn out pretty dark, but the green underneath does seem to bring just a tad bit more warmth into the hair. And maybe I'm seeing things, but I feel like the top half does look a little bit more purple than maybe the blonde swatches do, but I could be crazy. It could just be the lighting. Number 2 was gray. Similarly, I feel like I can see a little bit more of the purple coming through on the top half. And so I wonder if having a very cool toned base will help you get more of a violet-y color versus having too much warmth in the hair beforehand. The diluted section still looks more blue, but I feel like up here I can see a slight bit more of it leaning towards the purple end. But overall, still a kind of blue look. 3 was the natural red. I'm surprised to say that that one doesn't really look red anymore. The top half looks nearly black in this lighting. We will later do some before and after clips in natural lighting, so maybe we'll see a difference there where it's not as black. I will say the reddish tones in the hair did help the diluted section. That definitely has much more of a purpley look, but it's not going to be very vivid and bright. The brownish red underneath, I think the hair underneath kind of turned it into a like dustier purple, but definitely looks a lot less blue compared to a majority of the other swatches. So 4 was black. I don't see any difference on there. I do technically see a difference on 5, like compared to the top and the bottom, but neither of them really look like blue or purple. They just look kind of darker than before. If we're looking at the direct dye, once again, while I do see a difference on like 6 and 7, I feel like the color doesn't really come through until number 8. It still looks kind of like a dustier blue on 8 and 9. You don't get more saturation until 10 and 11 and 12. I see a difference on the 6 and 7 for the diluted section as well, but don't really get a lot of blue until 8, and then I feel like the 11 and 12 look the most saturated. 8 and 9 are quite dusty. 10 is kind of dusty too, but it is like a good middle ground between how saturated the 11 looks compared to the 9. It's kind of like right in the middle, which makes sense. So overall, it is quite pigmented, but I think a lighter base will give you a better result unless you're looking for a dustier blue. In that case, I would still do a strand test, especially if your hair is virgin hair, because I don't know how well this would take to hair that hasn't ever been dyed before. Okay, so I want to go into our comparisons. I decided to pick a more blue version and a more purpley version. I don't know if either of my comparisons are going to be exactly the same, but since this is technically supposed to be a violet, I decided we'll start with our more purple comparison, and that is Good Dye Young in the color People Eater. This is going to be comparable to number 12, 11, 10, and 9. So I remember when I did People Eater, I was extremely confused. It was still a very cool toned purple, but it looked so blue when I was dyeing the swatches. And in some lighting, People Eater still does have a very blue look, but when you put it next to blue, it definitely has a lot more purple. So you can see now that the iroiro Violet does lean extremely blue. Like, it genuinely seems like an indigo to me, more than a purple. You can even kind of see the effect that the People Eater had on the diluted sections. It kind of grayed out the ends a lot, whereas the diluted sections with Violet, once again, leans very blue. For my more blue comparison, we're going to do the brand Splat in the color Midnight Indigo. This is comparable to number 12, number 11, number 10, and number 9. So I know Splat is a very controversial brand, but I do like that they are cruelty-free and very accessible. Just be warned that many people say that their dye is very staining and stays in the hair a very long time. But honestly, this was the closest comparison I had. The next in line was Directions in the color Midnight, but that one leans way more dusty. It's not as saturated, whereas the Splat has very similar undertones and saturation levels. So the Splat leans much, much darker compared to the Violet, but overall, I feel like the undertones are very, very similar. The diluted section for Splat is still a little bit lighter than the direct dye for Violet, but hopefully you can see what I mean. And since this is called Midnight Indigo, I feel like it kind of confirms my suspicions that Violet, at least on my swatches, turned out basically like an indigo. Alright, so now I'd like to do our before and after clips. Those, as well as anything after this point in the video, will all be done in natural lighting. I hope my video helped. If you have a request, I do have a link below to a Google form you can fill out, but just keep in mind that I only do brands that do not test on animals. Thank you so much to my patrons, and thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.